As a pastor or preacher, teacher of the scriptures, of the gospel, I love it when people tell me that whatever sermon I preached has been useful and edifying and has spoken into their life in one way or another. And that's a very gratifying thing. You want to feel like you're making a difference. We all have that desire. And I appreciate that tremendously, especially those of you who are kind enough to say that these daily conversations have been beneficial to you. I quite honestly can tell you that the day that they aren't is the day that I'll stop doing it. So I thank you for those encouragements to keep on it, because it does take some time, effort, and work, basically. But one of the things that I find is even more satisfying is when somebody says, well, I've been watching your life and I decided that I wanted to have what you have. I see the difference that Jesus has made in your life, and I want him to make that kind of difference in my life. That's the kind of thing that really is powerful when you hear that. And the sad thing is, oftentimes we hear opposite criticism because Christians lose sight of what the real objective in life is. It's not to be rich, famous, and fabulous. It's to be a servant of the Lord who serves God effectively, as Jesus said in Luke 9, that after we've done everything that we were called to do, that we'll say, I'm an unworthy or undeserving servant, if you will. I've only done that which is my duty to do. And so when we have that humility of heart, we realize we do this because it's our responsibility, it's our duty to do it, and then people recognize that, it's really, really kind of a wonderful moment in your life. Because the whole reality is that some people have this concept that if you're being led of the Spirit, that there's no sweat or toil involved. And Paul said that of an elder, he said he has to be somebody who is committed to the work of the kingdom, the work of the gospel. And it is work. It's an outputting of energy. Now, there's an important distinction to make. As someone once put it so well, they said, we may get tired in the work, but we should never get tired of the work. And so, quite honestly, using myself as an example, if you don't mind, there's times when, Sunday afternoons, I come home, I'm pretty much a wrung out dish rag. I'm pretty exhausted, pretty tired, and really don't want to have to think about anything very hard. My wife is so kind to make our home a place where I can just basically unwind and relax on Sundays. But the fact is that as soon as I get rested, I'm anxious to get back at it, because I love being able to talk about God's word. I love to talk about the Lord. I love to think and contemplate and focus upon him and what he does in my life and in your life. These are things that you never get tired of. They're things that energize you over and over again. When I had a young lady, she probably 10 or 11 years old, came to me after our children's VBS, we call it Camp Calvary, that we do every year. This kind of 4-day extravaganza. I call it VBS on steroids. It's an amazing thing. But this young lady comes up to me, and she wanted me to sign her T-shirt, which I thought is interesting. And then she said, I want to let you know, I listened to your sermon last Sunday. And I'm thinking about, here's a 10 or 11-year-old girl sitting in my service, the adult service, and she said, I want you to know that after that service, I gave my life to Christ, and I want to thank you for that. And I was so impacted by that, because I thought, Lord Jesus, that's a miracle. Anytime anybody gives their life to Christ, that is a wonderful miracle. But a greater miracle is when we no longer have anything to say. And this was the case with my father, that for 15 years I'd shared with him. We tried to model our Christian faith, and we just tried to live our faith out, not to show them anything, but because we figured that's the important thing to do. And I remember, even though he had criticized me and challenged me for years and years and years, when I spoke to him at the end of his life, he said, it was watching you and your wife, the way you lived your life, that convinced me that you're probably the first true Christian I've ever met. And for my dad, who had some bad taste in his mouth from World War II and dealing with some of the chaplains that he had to deal with, long story, won't go into it, but I knew that he just felt like pastors and chaplains and ministers were just guys who did this for a profession. It was their job. And when he saw that we were willing to do whatever God wanted us to do, go everywhere God wanted to go and serve him, and we prayed and we sought God and we were earnest about our faith, even when he didn't agree with some stuff. And frankly, to be honest, sometimes he was right. Sometimes that's a little extreme. But nonetheless, it had an impact because he knew that we weren't just going through the motions. This is what we lived. This was what we were centering our life on. And that's how, in a way, it says that you can win those without a word. Because I had come to the place I thought, there's really nothing left to say. It just furthers more arguments going in the same circle. And so I just stopped trying to convince my dad and trying to preach to him. I just thought, I'm just going to love my dad just the way he is and pray and hope that he comes to Christ. In fact, I got so frustrated at one point, I told the Lord in a fit of petulance, Lord, I'm not going to pray for him anymore. It doesn't do any good. I didn't mean that, but I just wanted to say that nonetheless. Sometimes we do that, right? We just say it even though we don't believe it, because we just got to get it out of the inside and out in front of us so we can see how ridiculous it really is. So here it was. I popped this out in my prayer, and it was shortly after that he gave his life to Christ without my assistance. But it was such a profound thing because he told me, he said, you're the first real Christian I've ever known. And I don't think that's really completely true, but it's true enough that it made a difference. It doesn't mean, and I think when you particularly talk about the relationship of a wife to her husband, it doesn't mean that she can't speak or her mind or can't share. Some guys have this idea, when it says, well, she needs to keep silence. The idea is that she got to sit there and never say anything except yes, dear, no, dear, how high, dear. That silence doesn't even mean that. It's talking about a tranquility of spirit, not an absence of verbiage. Wives are the most valuable asset that any husband has because she sees things objectively. And as my wife said to me one time when she was offering me a criticism, is I don't say this because I don't love you. I do love you, and I want you to be the best that you can be. And besides that, when you act this way, you make me look bad. So I thought, oh, okay. I mean, it really was an epiphany for me because I realized she's not just ragging on me because she's having a bad day. She is very concerned about my behavior, my attitude, and she wants me to improve. You find out that your wife can be the most ardent supporter that you have in your life. She wants you to do well. She wants you to succeed. But at the same time, he says to the wives, there comes a point where it's better not to try to convince or argue the point. Most importantly, he said, let them be won over without the words, because we find in all relationships, the validity of our story is based upon the closeness of our life to that story. That people believe that what we're saying is the truth when they see that it's true in us. And it doesn't mean we're perfect, because we're not, we never will be. But they see that sincerity. That's why Paul said to the Corinthians in the opening of his first letter, he says that he served God with simplicity and with sincerity. Someone once said, sincerity is the key thing. If you can fake that, you've got it made. And there are a lot of people who fake sincerity, but they can't fake it forever. They can be really nice and warm and loving and charitable and gracious and charming, but you hang around them long enough, you're going to see the other side of that coin. As Mark Twain said, the dark side of the moon that we hope nobody will ever see. And that's where he says it makes a difference. When they see that this is something that's a sincerely held belief in your heart. And what that really, I think, is talking about when he talks about not using words, it means you're not nagging, you're not berating, you're not belittling, that you don't have a critical or a contemptuous spirit. And it's this issue of contempt that I think is probably the most significant dynamic in all of these things. And it's so significant that I think I'll wait till tomorrow, because it's going to take me a little time to talk about how that applies and how it manifests itself destructively into a relationship. So, hey, sorry to apologize for keeping you hanging, but we'll get this to tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. Many blessings.